What's going on, YouTube? What's up, Raider Nation? I'm Bubba the Raider coming at you on this beautiful Saturday morning. Drinking my coffee, thinking about the state of the end of the season and where we sit with our Raiders. So, haven't made a video since right before the second KC game. And there's a reason for that. I always come in and I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher and I've been busy, which is all true. But I'm also a little bit superstitious with football. And I made the KC video and we lost pretty bad. And I thought before the next game, every game's so important. And the last time I made a video, we lost. So I'm going to wait and not make a video and see what happens. And we beat Denver. And I'm like, well, that worked. So let's try it again. Obviously, I know that there's nothing I do that impacts the team, but I'm sure you guys can relate. Sitting in certain spots in your living room or not eating certain things on the day or whatever. I drink from this cup every game day, and I don't know. So I didn't make a video, and it was working in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll wait till the freaking Super Bowl. But unfortunately, we were knocked out round one by the Bengals, which I'll talk about. Thoughts on the season overall. Really impressed with certain aspects of this team, the way that they rallied. Been through more this season than any team I think probably ever has been through. Just in terms of maybe not one thing as grave as all the others, except for the Henry Ruggs situation, because there was a loss of life, which is horrible, and a loss of an animal's life as well, which is so sad, right? But I think, teams go through stuff, teams lose teammates, coaches get cancer, all those things, but there was just one thing after the next. I read this morning that, again, Damon Arnett got in trouble, so, that took a role too. I'm sure he had players on that team that were friends of his that all of a sudden he was just not there. Probably not a shock to them, but it was something that they had to deal with. So overall, super impressed with the fortitude and the resilience of this team. Really didn't like the way we dipped there. Didn't like the way we lost to certain teams like the Giants or the Bengals the first time, or Washington football team, where it's just kind of like we were better. Chicago, we were a better football team. And I think we really started to elevate our play towards the end. But we have big holes on this team. We always have big holes on the team, and it makes sense that we have big holes on this team. So let's talk about the Bengals game. First playoff game for Derek Carr, which right off the rip, I'm a massive Derek Carr supporter. I want Derek Carr to be our quarterback for years to come. I'm not sorry for it. I think he's a lot like Matthew Stafford. Give him a team, adequate pieces around him, time, defense, things we've been working on, and actually you can see the improvement this year in the team. Everyone's like, oh, he doesn't throw touchdowns, but who is he throwing touchdowns to? You know what I mean? We'll talk about that too this offseason. That's my thought. But you start giving him pieces, you look at where Stafford is versus where Stafford was. I mean, he had Calvin Johnson, but who else has he had? And so one person does not a team make. And so I think that, I was going to talk about this at the very end, but I think we need to extend Derek Carr. I think we need to give him what he wants. I know he talked about what he wants. I don't think he's going to want a bunch of money. He's going to want a team around him, and I think he's going to want a no-trade clause to ensure that he has not these rumblings and these rumors unless it's in his control, and that makes sense to me, So I think we need to extend Derek Carr. I think that needs to be one of the first priorities of this offseason. That's just me. Bengals game. Derek Carr got there, we got there, and it was a pretty good game. But I think our biggest holes really shined in that game and are the reason we lost that game. And I'm not one of the Raider fans who are like, oh, the whistle, the whistle, the whistle, the whistle. I think Trayvon Merrick got beat on that play, whistle or not. I think really what beat us in that game was our freaking offensive line, which is what I think is our biggest hole. How many holding calls? How many drive-killing holding calls did our offensive line have this year? How many drive-killing offensive line or hold calls did our offensive line have in that game? Like, you want to win football games, you don't give up all of those holds. And I mean, I get it. Trey Hendrickson's good, but he went out. Like, who are we holding? Like, why are we holding? So I think, it makes sense that our offensive line is going to struggle. And I'll talk about that probably in another video when I talk about because I have a whole bunch I want to get through today. But when you get rid of 4/5 of your starting offensive line and you don't really upgrade any of those players that you got rid of or don't have, this is what's going to happen. I've not seen this bad of an offensive line with the Raiders in years. Like years. And when there's not holes to run through, the running game's going to suffer. And you saw that, right? With the exception of at the end, they started doing better in run block, right? Josh started to turn it up. But people were calling for Josh's head for 3/4 of the season. And granted, he has a fumbling problem. And so does Derek. Like, I'm not going to deny that. But you can tell Josh is going to fumble because he holds the ball out here, and it. But regardless, I digress. We need offensive linemen, and we need development with the offensive linemen that we have, that we've invested in, That's why we lost that game. And it was for the fact that we gave up all of those insane holding calls, and then just penalties killed us, and then we still were down to it in the very last play. And I know everyone wants to crap on Derek, and probably wasn't the best decision. Actually, I disagree. I think he went to the best decision for that play design. That play right there, Derek should have audibled out of it. If you want to criticize Derek for anything about that last play in Cincinnati, is that if Derek audibled into it, criticize him. The fact that we didn't audible out of it, criticize him. But the fact that we drew up a play where our two best receiving options, Waller and Renfro, are freaking 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and the only person in the end zone or near the end zone is Zay Jones. What is that? And Derek threw it to Zay Jones, and like all the pre-play stuff, take that off the table. That's exactly who Derek should have thrown it to, whether he was double covered or not, because he's the only person within a physical position on the field to score a touchdown, which is what we need right then and there. So Waller should have been in the end zone. And I know people were saying he was turning up, but that's so slow developing, and you're crazy to think that the offensive line is going to give enough time for Waller to come out and do this lackadaisical route. Not that his route was lackadaisical, but the design of it was, and get in the end zone, and Derek's going to be able to throw it. Like, why would you even draw that up? You need players in the end zone right now, and Derek needs to have choices in the end zone. That only makes sense, and we didn't call that type of a play. So Renfro should have been in the end zone. Waller should have been in the end zone. Edwards should have been in the end zone. And I don't remember if we were in 3 or 4 wide, but and Zay Jones should have been in the end zone. And I know that Zay was outside of the end zone and Derek threw it to him. That's on Zay. But what else? I mean, what's more likely, that Zay catches a ball and turns his body and stretches it out a foot to get in the end zone, or that you throw to Darren Waller while they're running the zone and he's able to make 3 guys miss and go 10 yards into the end zone? It was a bad play call. And so that's why I think we lost the game. Holding calls and honestly, that last play, I don't put the throw on Derek. I don't put the decision to throw there on Derek. I put the play call on whoever called the play. And I do put that on Derek for not changing it if he had the opportunity to. I think Greg Olsen needs to go. But I felt that for a couple of years now. We move into the next element of the offseason. Mike Mayock's firing, I disagree with it. I understand it, but I disagree with it. I don't think he was fired because of drafting. I think he was fired because I don't think he was ever Mark Davis's guy. I think he was John Gruden's guy. They were kind of a package deal. John Gruden's gone, so Mike Mayock is gone. I would have liked to see Mike Mayock stay on, be involved in picking the next head coach. But again, if he's not Davis's guy, then that makes sense. I don't think it was because of drafting, because to be honest, he wasn't a bad drafter. And there's debate about the first round, and John wanted who John wanted, and Mayock, who was John's and who was Mayock's picks. But here's what I will say. If you are going to put all the blame on Mike Mayock for drafting Alex Leatherwood, Damon Arnett, Henry Ruggs, which doesn't make sense because Henry Ruggs was looking good, like a good pick, but then he made the poor decision, and it was, by all intents and purposes, or all knowledge, the first major event he's had. Not that that excuses horrendous, it's the worst event, but there was no indicator that was what was going to happen. Lynn Bowden, Tanner Muse, right? You're going to blame him for all of those, then you have to credit him for finding Trayvon Mullen in the second, right? Max Crosby in the fourth, Hunter Renfrow in the fifth, Nate Hobbs in the fifth, Foster Moreau, Divine Diablo looked so good at the end of the season. Like, that's going to be another guy that is a building block, I think, right? And even Alex Leatherwood. Like, Alex Leatherwood is a much better pick. I know he struggled this year, but he's a much better pick than Damon Arnett. Damon Arnett is the worst of all of it because he was not good on the field, and there were indicators that was the case. And he wasn't good on the field. He was awful on the field, right? If you remember, when he got freaking cut, he wasn't playing because he was a liability. Teams were coming at him the minute he was on the field. I was really hoping it would work out with him in Kansas City so that they would have a liability at corner on the field. He's awful. So that was a horrible pick, right? But I just feel like if you're going to blame him for the first misses, and there are a lot of them, you have to credit him for the later hits, which is harder to do. So we have some pieces. We fired him. I don't agree with it. However, I understand it. We'll move on. So in terms of preferred GMs moving forward, I don't know a lot of these guys, right? But I do know from the research I've done, I like Ed Dobbs, and I know that that is the common thing with Raider fans right now. But I watch a lot of draft stuff, and the last couple of years they've put out these behind the scenes videos of like the drafting process in Indianapolis, where Chris Ballard is their GM, and I have a ton of respect for him, right? And then Ed Dodds was his assistant GM, right? And you can see him involved in those decisions. You can see him, he's talking on these players and what he thinks, and they're good players. And I remember reading a quote that after they lost to Kansas City a couple years back in the AFC Championship, he got his crew together, went out for some drinks, and basically said, like, this is bullshit. We don't play this game to play in AFC championships, and you better not be content because I'm not. We need to work harder. And I like that. I like that a lot. So of all my preferred GMs, he's number one and really the only one. Like, I don't know. I'm sure that I don't think he will be the GM we hire, to be honest, and I'll talk about that in a minute. For my preferred coaches, number one, I think Rich Bisaccia deserves a shot. Now, I am surprised to hear myself say that. I was very critical of things. I felt like he was way too conservative at times. I didn't like the idea of taking knees before the half with 3 minutes left, or with 3 timeouts left and a minute and a half. I'm like, come on, like, let's go. I didn't like how anytime, I know his special teams bias came through, and I think sometimes we won games because of it, but I want a little bit more. But he's a first-year head coach, the first interim head coach since 1960 whatever to take a team to the playoffs. He deserves a shot. The players are rallying around him. I genuinely think if we don't bring back Rich Bisaccia it will start to spell the end for a lot of players' time with the Raiders. Second coach I would want, Jim Harbaugh, I guess. Like, only because he has been around a lot of football. And, you know, he was good with San Francisco. He was good at Stanford. He's been okay at Michigan, big time this year. I don't think he's on the table. I don't think the interest is real. I don't really think the interest is real from either sides. But I think he's trying to use us to drive up his extension at Michigan, and I think maybe we're trying to use him to get some guys to take better deals. I don't know, but I guess Harbaugh would be my second choice of given coaches. Then it would be Dable from Buffalo, but he just signed with the Giants yesterday. Offensive coordinator. Their offense, it speaks for itself. I think he's a really good coach, and I think he'll be good with the Giants. I think he'll be able to get a lot out of Daniel Jones because they've made a statement that they're going to stick with him. Next would be Eberflus, but again, he was the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, and their defense has been really freaking good. Like, they draft a lot of guys that I really like. They've gotten the most out of guys like Kenny Moore, and that I just think their defense is a solid unit. You know, they drafted, you know, Bobby Okereke and Darius Leonard, and I was a big Darius Leonard guy, and I'm sure he was involved in all that stuff. So if we're going to go for a defensive-minded guy, I wouldn't mind Eberflus, but he just was hired for the Bears gig. And so that's scary too, because they've got really good defensive pieces over there as well. And then finally, I guess I'm a little conflicted on this. Josh McDaniels. I'm going to put him at number 5. I never thought I would say that either. I really didn't like him ever. He kind of reminded me a lot of Lane Kiffin. But, you know, he's spent all that time in New England. Belichick technically is a defensive-minded coach, I think, but he's really an all-around coach. I'm sure that he's learned a ton. It makes me nervous watching what he did to Indianapolis I keep talking about Indy, but watching what he did in Indy in 2018, which is why I don't think we can have Ed Dodds and Josh McDaniels, and I got kind of jumped down my throat for posting that. I talked about that on Bleacher Report, to be honest, yesterday. But Ed Dodds was the assistant GM when Josh McDaniels accepted the head coaching job, put together staff, started getting people out there, and then backed out, right? And in that time, other head coaches were hired. Like, Indianapolis kind of got screwed out of some other head coaches. Now, they found Frank Reich, and Frank Reich's a good head coach and whatever. But Ed Dodds has been very cautious about taking a GM job. They say usually you only get one shot at a GM job. And when you do, you need to do a really good job, or else it won't be a long shot and you won't have another one. So you can see his caution for taking GM jobs. He backed out of the Cleveland job. I think he backed out of Chicago's job this year. I don't think there's any way he's going to accept the GM job with the Raiders and then want to bring in Josh McDaniels when Josh McDaniels, he's seen firsthand. I'm not saying it. Everyone that commented on my post was like, you know, keep emotions out of it. I don't think it's emotions. I think it's work history, right? It's professional decision, and you're not going to want to hang your professional hat. Maybe he will, but I wouldn't, on someone who has already proven to burn you and your organization you worked for before. So I don't think we'll get them both. I really think it'll end up being Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. I don't know anything about Dave Ziegler, but he's been involved with the Patriots, and you know, that speaks for itself. They've built some pieces around there. But especially if we get Josh McDaniels, I think that we are going to want to extend Carr. And I think that makes sense to me. Like, I think maybe he won't, maybe he'll want to find his own guy. But, you know, I think he probably learned last time about finding his own guy when you move on from Jay Cutler, who was debatably playing some of his best football, for Kyle Orton and Tim Tebow. So I think he'll want to extend Carr, which I like that. I think he's probably learned a lot. I think he's probably come a long way from his early 30s. Now he's in his mid 40s, and he spent all this time with Bill Belichick and the Patriots and winning rings and seeing championship football. So as much as my initial reaction is not to like it, I'm open to it, and I think ultimately I think that's the route we'll go. So I think we'll have Josh McDaniels as our coach and Dave Ziegler as our GM. But if it was me making the decision, I would like Rich Bisaccia to have another year and Ed Dodds. And I would sell it to him like that. Hey, guys earned a job. And we're going to stick with him for a year, see how it goes. If not, we can move on from him, and we can move forward with this vision, but he's earned the job. I think fans are wrong when they talk about keeping him as our special teams coordinator, only because, and again, it's not always feelings, but there are feelings involved. These are people. It's not Madden. If you were the interim head coach in the situation and you've dealt with all these different things and you stepped in and your team rallied around you and you took them to the playoffs, why would you accept the fact that they picked someone else over you and then stay on that team or stay as that special teams coordinator? Like, it would feel like you would have no shot at elevation. And realistically, I'm sure he wants to be a head coach. Otherwise, he wouldn't have interviewed for that job. And so I've heard rumblings that he's going to go join Eberflus in Chicago. And, I wouldn't blame him. But, not my favorite choice, but I think he deserves it. I think he's earned it. And I want to keep this team together. And I think the only way you do that, because if we get rid of Rich, then Olsen's gone, and I'm fine with that. But then I almost would guarantee that guys like Marinelli would be gone. And, Max Crosby loves Marinelli, and Yannick Ngakoue loves Marinelli. And these defensive linemen who have really stepped up for us love him. Gus Bradley's gone, which means that I would not be surprised to see Denzel Perryman leave, which I love Denzel Perryman. I don't know what his contract looks like, if it's 1 or 2 years, but ultimately I think he'll leave eventually. Casey Hayward will be gone. A lot of these San Diego, LA Charger guys that we brought in because they were familiar with Bradley and his system will probably follow him, which creates more holes for us to fill. So I don't know. It's tough, but I think that we'll go McDaniels and Ziegler. So anyway, that's it for me today, Raider Nation. I'll come back on here and start talking about thoughts on the offseason and kind of break it down, probably make a video about who we need to re-sign, and then who we need to let walk in free agency, and then free agents I think we should sign, and draft pieces. This channel, I'm really big on the draft. It's like my favorite time of the year. So I'll come in and I'll talk about all that stuff. But I really just want to get my thoughts on the final season and on the GM and coaching search out. So let me know what you think. If you like this video, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. If you have something to say, if you want to tell me about what I'm overlooking or whatever, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And as always, just win, baby. This is awkward.